Welcome, Dr. Todd, to the podcast. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm really thrilled to have you here.
Oh, thanks, Arabella. Thanks a lot.
Let's get straight in there. You've written a book called Psyche and Singularity. Would you mind please defining for the listeners what you mean by singularity?
Okay. It is a point of infinite density, and it is Carl Schwarzschild discovered it in Einstein's gravitational field equations for the general theory of relativity in 1916. I think it was February that he published the paper. And he just pointed out it was Schwarzschild who gave Einstein the first exact solution to the field equations for general relativity. I'm not a mathematician. I just know the words that they use. So Einstein had, I guess, approximate field equations. And this guy Schwarzschild, who was in the trenches of World War I at the time, came up with the exact solutions. So Einstein was happy. That was December 22nd, 1915. I know because my mother's birthday is December 22nd. So that was when the first exact solutions for the general theory of relativity. Then he said, oh, look, according to your theory, if enough mass is concentrated in a small enough radius, which is called the Schwarzschild radius because of him, it will collapse indefinitely into a point of infinite density. And then Einstein said, well, that's impossible because acceleration is equivalent to gravity. That's the general theory of relativity. But nothing can go faster than the speed of light, which was special relativity. But if acceleration and gravity are equivalent, infinite acceleration is infinite gravity. You're telling me this is a point of infinite gravity that's equivalent to a point traveling infinitely fast. That's impossible, says Einstein. That's ridiculous. Just because my theory says that it's a quirk. Nature won't allow it. That's what he thought.
Mm-hmm.
But that's what a singularity is. It contains all of space and time in a point of zero volume, no extension in space, and yet it contains all space and time. It's a conundrum for physicists. It drives a lot of them crazy. There's been a lot of documentaries about what is a singularity, and some of them say it doesn't exist, like Einstein originally. But Sir Roger Penrose just recently received the Nobel Prize for his paper in 1965, 64, 65, where he demonstrated, working off of a paper from Robert J. Oppenheimer from the first day of World War II in September 1, 1939. In 65, Penrose developed it more, and he said, if a star collapses, and if it has sufficient mass, then the math shows it must necessarily become a singularity. There's no escaping it mathematically, even though that's the point where all of the laws of physics break down. You can't predict what will come out of a singularity because it predicts everything will come out of a singularity. It's infinite. But black holes, the empirical observations for black holes have been made repeatedly by this point. Mm-hmm. So most people say it must be there. And this is this huge, it's a hole in the material world, basically.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
No, this is so beautifully mind-blowing, and I'd love to come back to dive deeper into potential implications of what you've just said with regards to multidimensionality, etc.
Okay.
But before we do that, I'd like to explore, or you can help us explore, the synthesis between psyche and singularity and that convergence, because this is the nature of your life's work.
Yeah, so Carl Jung was working with Wolfgang Pauli. I call him Pauli. I used to call him Pauli, but Sean Kelly told me it was Pauli. I hope I recall that correctly because
I say Pauli, whatever.
You say Pauli, right? Right. Yeah, you're okay. You're European. He's European. Because in America, people say Pauli, and they think I'm being
no, you guys say Van Gogh as well, which
right.
We don't do that. Everyone has their own different thing. So
right.
We'll go with Pauli.
So Jung and Pauli were working together to discover the mirror symmetries between the laws of physics and the laws of psychology. So Pauli was working with Heisenberg and Niels Bohr to create the Copenhagen interpretation of quantum mechanics. So he's right there in the center of physics, right at the top, considered by most the best mathematical theoretical physicist of the time. And he was having psychological issues, and he went to Jung for help. And then Jung said, oh, I'm going to work with this guy because here's a genius of mathematics and he's interested in archetypal psychology. And so they, for 25 years, what was it? It was 1958. So subtract from that 25 years, I forget, it was in the 30s at some point, but they were looking for these parallels.
Mm-hmm.
And that was based on Plato. They both knew that. They both acknowledged that. And in the Republic, Plato in the cave allegory said the material world is a shadow or a reflection of the eternal world of absolute ideas.
Yeah.
And then in book 7, he set up the first academic curriculum for physics. He said, study the mathematical forms, which describe the material forms, because the mathematical forms are like an intermediary step between the material forms and the eternal absolute forms, or the absolute ideas, because the mathematical forms are eternal. So you know what?
Numbers.
Yeah, numbers. They're eternal, and they clearly describe the material world that you can see. That gives you a step into the spiritual world. I'm gonna say it really quickly. It was the cave allegory was his explanation of the divided line. And he says, if you look at existence like a line divided into 4 segments, at the top is the absolute ideas like truth, beauty, and justice, and then all these other subsidiary ideas. Below that is the mathematical shadows or reflections of those absolute ideas. And that those 2 segments constitute the eternal intelligible world. The mathematical forms, which are the shadows of the higher order of forms, have their shadow in the material 3-dimensional forms of our empirical material world. And then those material physical objects, like our bodies and everything that you can see and touch, they have actual shadows and mirror reflections, real shadows and real reflections. So the mathematical forms reflect the higher order of forms. The material forms reflect the mathematical forms, and then mirror reflections reflect the 3-dimensional forms. The point is, if you study the mathematical forms that describe nature, you're getting a kind of a carbon copy into this higher order of forms. And then he says, all of these eternal absolute forms are ideas that eidos come from the ultimate idea of the good, which is the supremely brilliant source of light in the in the empirically observable visible world. And he equated that with the sun. So the idea of the good is the source of the sun, which is the source of visible light. And it's the source of intelligence and truth in the intellectual, intelligible world of eternal absolute ideas. This is the absolute idea of the good, which I'm equating with the gravitational singularity, which brings us back to the question. How does the singularity and the psyche relate?
Yeah.
So Pauli and Jung were looking for the mirror symmetries between mathematical physics of nature and these higher order of forms, which culminate for them with the idea of with the archetype of the self, or the unus mundus, they called it, the one world. And so in one letter, Leap Day, 1952, February 29, to J.R. Smithies, he wrote a letter. And he was speculating about Einstein's equation, E equals mc squared.
Mm-hmm.
And Jung talked with Einstein for several years. Well, it was 1909 to 1913. They had dinner conversations. Einstein taught him about special relativity, and he was working on general relativity at the time because they were both living in Switzerland, which is where you are now.
Yep.
So Jung knew about relativity theory, and he said psyche has its own energy. It's not a byproduct of matter. It's its own thing. If it's energy, it must have mass, because E equals mc squared. But we can't measure psychic mass. Maybe it's because it's too small, he speculated in an earlier letter. Or maybe in this Leap Day letter, he said it's because it's infinite. And he went through his reasonings, and he brought in the concept of the faster you go through space, the slower you go through time. And if you hit the speed of light, you exit space and time. This he learned from Einstein himself. So he came to the conclusion that maybe psyche is an infinite intensity of energy, and therefore it exits space. And he concluded with this equation: psyche equals sign highest intensity in the smallest space. He was already talking about infinite intensities of energy. So the highest intensity is infinite, and the smallest space is zero volume, and that's the definition of a gravitational singularity. And he was speaking in the context of special and general relativity. So it's a natural translation of his own equation. So psyche equals singularity. The psyche is a gravitational singularity. The singularity is not a physical thing. It's the source of all of the physical world at the Big Bang. It's the end of all of the physical world at each black hole.
Does that mean we're just fractal black holes?
I think so, yeah. We're all that. And here's a great one. There was this philosophy mathematician professor, Robert Bruce Ware, and he wrote a book on Hegel.
Yeah.
I refer to him a lot in Psyche and Singularity because he was talking about Hegel's absolute idea, and he was pointing out how similar it is to a singularity. And a very crucial point that he brought in was Leibniz's principle of the identity of indiscernibles.
Okay.
And he said, according to Leibniz, who co-discovered calculus at the same time as Isaac Newton, there's a big debate about who came up with it first. He said, if you cannot distinguish the difference between two things, they are identical. That was his principle of the identity of indiscernibles.
Can you say that again? Can you say that again?
If you cannot discern a difference between two things, then they are identical.
Okay. Okay.
Which seems like common sense, but it doesn't seem so commonsensical when you apply it to a singularity. But this is what Robert Bruce Ware did. And he said a singularity, even though black holes appear strewn throughout the cosmos, and there's a black hole at the Big Bang, so there's singularities seemingly everywhere, also at each point of the quantum vacuum and at each point of the horizon of the cosmos, which is an important point for my whole theory. But getting back to Ware, he says you can't tell the difference between one singularity and another, despite their gravitational influence appearing in different points of space-time, because each of these singularities is outside of space and time. And furthermore, they're all structurally identical because they have no structure. It's a point, a mathematical point with zero extension in space. So even though they manifest gravitationally all over the place, including as the universe itself, given the eruption of the universe from the Big Bang, they are to be found nowhere in space-time. So you can't differentiate them by their spatial or temporal appearances, and they're structurally identical, so you can't differentiate them by their different shapes, so therefore they must be identical, which has profound spiritual implications. I believe we are all inconceivably simultaneously one self, and at the same time, we all have our independent, individual, eternal, subjective autonomy. We're absolutely part of one supreme self, and you can't distinguish one from another in one respect. And from another, I think it's self-evident that we're all individual selves. But I define the self as a singularity.
Thank you. That was a really, really rich explanation. That last point you made in terms of self and multiplicity and unity, it makes me think of this science fiction writer called David Zindell. In one of his books, I forget which one it is, he talks about this concept he calls plexity. Yeah, plexity.
Yeah.
And there's 4 stages to this process. The first one is simplex. Yeah, and it's a kind of cosmic process, right? A kind of divine unfolding. Simplex is the notion of having one quite dogmatic perspective, right? Someone who says, okay, the world was created in 7 days, and if you don't believe that, you're going to burn in eternal hellfires. The next stage is complex, and that is someone or an entity who has the ability to discard belief systems as necessary as they evolve and learn more. All right, so they can acknowledge that, a bit like in the way that science constantly develops itself, and there's constantly new information coming in, so it's constantly extending its parameters and discarding things and then moving forward, right? The next phase is multiplex, which is to hold opposing beliefs at the same time, right? Which is a much more advanced kind of multi-perspectival position. That's you're getting closer to the Godhead then, because you're able to see that the person who believes that the world was created in 7 days, even if that might not be objectively true, are they wrong because they are a fractal shard of God consciousness itself having that experience? So at some level, it's true. And then the final stage of this unfolding is omniplex, which is to hold every single perspective at the same time, which is what you're talking about. It's that higher level, and this confers, it necessitates a kind of multidimensional cascade, if you will, because we're operating here. You're in your body, I'm in my body. You've had your personal experience, which I don't have access to right now in this point, in this physical vessel, right? But at a higher level, I do. I, whatever the I is, and you have mine, because we're all part of this one. It's all one. And that's just kind of a kind of quite simple logic, really, that everything exists, belongs to this primordial unity. So I just wanted to offer that.
Yeah, I mean that's how I define God.
Right.
And I think I heard you just say the same thing on a podcast. Who is God? God is that self who experiences every other self's perspective simultaneously, while distilling all of those into a unique perspective of God's own. Whereas none of us can do that, at least not in any continuous basis.
Right.
Maybe brief glimpses we can have.
Right.
But God works continuously on that, seen through everybody's cockroaches, amoebas,
Yeah.
electrons.
Yeah.
What's this amoeba thinking? Oh, this is a passionate fight to the death for this molecule of whatever. From an amoeba's perspective, that's all consumingly, passionately important. I think God experiences all of that.
Yeah. Levels, right? Every
Yeah.
time I've had any sort of mystical insight into the fundamental ontology of the universe, it's been the memo I've received has just been levels. There are levels and levels and levels to the
Yeah.
cosmic intelligence. And this speaks to what you were just talking about with regards to Psyche and singularity, because obviously singularities and black holes are born from a star dying and collapsing in on itself. Do you see stars as sort of cosmic neurons in a neural network, a gargantuan neural network that is at a cosmic scale? Because I do, and I think they're all talking to each other.
I mean, when I'm saying that the whole universe itself is a
Mind.
conscious being
Yeah.
centered on the self, that doesn't sound crazy to me. I didn't ever specifically put it together that way, but I believe that all the planets are incarnate sentient beings. That the philosophers of the past just said that's the demigod of this planet, the demigod of that planet. I think there is some kind of an organizing, super intelligent psyche on a higher level of spiritual evolution who preside over the planets. I do believe that. I don't know. The only, I guess, empirical evidence I would provide for that would be astrology, archetypal astrology, the way Rick Tarnas talks about it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that sounds, and if it's a fractal cosmos, which I believe it is, then we're going to see the workings of the brain reflected at every scale. In some way, it must be the case if it is true that it's a fractal cosmos.
Well, I mean, it is, isn't it?
Yeah, I believe it
It's
is.
just blatantly it blatantly is. There was an idea I got exploring last year, which I call depth cosmology. I mean, this is basically completely up your strata. It's essentially what you're saying. It was just a nomenclature I attributed to it, which is if the universe is a mind, which it is, then we need to apply the same sorts of techniques and approaches we use in psychology, right? So like specifically depth psychology. So Jungian processes, dream analysis, understanding the psyche as something more poetic and symbolic. I truly believe the next iteration of physics, of science, is to start blending, cosmology as a practice of science with mythology, with archetypal astrology, with poetics, with multidisciplinary approach to the cosmos, because if it's a mind, then it requires the same sort of praxis or theory and praxis that we deploy to understand the lived expression of humanity, which reveals itself in myth. Yeah, and do you know what does that make sense what I'm saying?
Sure. Oh yeah, we talked about Hegel a little earlier.
Yeah, I'd love for you to talk about Hegel.
He was saying this, and I read this in Sean Kelly's Hegel seminar, and I believe it was 1797. It was his first writing, and he wrote all about that, how the need for a future form of government, the current one treats us like cogs in a machine, he says. It's based on a Newtonian model. He says we need a new physics and a new mythology for a new future form of government where people are free. And so, yeah, I definitely I like the Vedanta philosophy of India, the Vaishnava Vedanta specifically. The Vishnu, I mean, there's the Shaivites, the Shaktas, and the Vaishnavas. I know you refer to the Shaktas and Kali, and each of those branches recognizes the divinity of all the others, but they give, oh, Kali's the source, Shiva's the source, Vishnu's the source. So that's where they disagree, but they all contain each other. But according to that cosmology, the cosmos exhales, innumerable bubble universes exhale from Mahavishnu. And inside every center of every bubble universe, there's another Vishnu incarnation, and the lotus flower stems from the belly button, and Lakshmi's massaging his legs, and then Brahma's born on the flower. And then in every atom, in every spiritual atom or Atman, is another Vishnu called Paramatma, topmost Atma, which I think is equivalent to this idea of the omnicentric singularity. That's the person who's experiencing everyone simultaneously, because that's the person in the center of every other singularity's
Do you mean God?
sentience.
Do you mean like the Godhead?
The God, one of the manifestations of the God.
Okay.
So for the Vaishnavas, there's three. There's the personal form where they live on planets with spiritual bodies and engage in all kinds of pastimes with each other.
Okay.
And then there's Paramatma, which is God as this atomic soul who's everywhere inside every other soul. And another manifestation of God is Brahman, which is the impersonal ocean of waves of probability. So God is personal and impersonal. There's the debate among Vedantists. Those who follow Shankara say all of the individuality is an illusion, like a doll made of salt that should be returned to the ocean. And all that is real is Brahman. Atman is a temporary illusion arising from Brahman. The Vaishnavas, the Gaudiya Vaishnava, which came in the 16th century, says Atman is eternal, but so is Brahman. Inconceivably simultaneously, they're both co-eternal. I see the Atman's eternality as a particle and as a wave reflected in quantum mechanics. By the two-slit experiment, if you shoot particles, electrons or photons or whatever, through the two slits and you're not observing, they're detected by the detector screen as little hits, but over time they create this interference pattern as if a wave had gone through all at once. The wave goes through the two slits, and then two new waves come out. They ripple out, they interfere with each other, and there's light and dark bands on the detector screen. Where the peaks hit, they amplify. Where the peak in the valley hits, they cancel. Light, dark, light, dark. If they were little particles, they would line up directly behind the two slits, like bullets. Then when they put an electron microscope to see which slit it went through, they lined up directly behind the slits, like two bullets. So when they were being observed, they acted like particles. When they weren't being observed, they went through those slits as waves. And then when they were observed by the detector screen, they would collapse into a particle. But it would be distributed all over the place, and it would add up to a wave. I see that as the reflection in physics of the Atman equals Brahman paradox, which is at the foundation of self-realization for the Vedanta philosophy. I think it's neatly reflected in that particle wave paradox. It helps me understand. I'm an individual, and yet I'm merged in this impersonal ocean of potentiality. Yeah, and then so I'm merged with Brahman, and I'm also merged with Paramatman, because we're all part of this one supreme particle of consciousness. So we're all one, and we're all unique in several ways. And it has to do with particle wave. Anyway, we got off on a tangent there.
No, not really. I mean, yeah, it was a tangent, but it kind of makes perfect sense with everything you've been speaking about and is completely coalescent and structurally very coherent. I've never heard the wave particle schism couched in those terms, but now you've said it, it makes so much sense.
Yeah, it seems pretty
I mean,
simple.
it's quite a simple logic there, and it makes so much sense.
Yeah,
Have you ever heard, John Wheeler, the physicist who speculated that the entirety of existence is just one electron?
yeah, definitely have
I
heard that.
resonate with that. Do you resonate with that?
Yeah, I do. I think the entire universe is one singularity. So it's
Sure.
the same
Would they
principle.
be comparable, an electron and a singularity? I mean,
Well, the
insofar as it's
electron,
light, something to do with light?
well, an electron comes from a singularity at the Big
Okay.
Bang. I think all of the particles are just manifestations of this singularity. I'm equating the singularity with the idea of the good. It's the source of everything, God. So everything is a manifestation of that. But in physics, the singularity is the point of infinite density. It contains all space and time. Wheeler's point was all electrons are identical, but they
Mm,
manifest in different points of space and time.
yeah.
You can differentiate one electron from another by its location in space and time because they are in space and time. Singularities are
Right.
not in space time.
Okay, I'm with you. I'm with you.
But he was just saying, nevertheless, they're identical. Maybe he says it's traveling back and forth through time, or so.
I think it might be just be one photon.
Okay, there you go. Well, we all think it's one something.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't see that necessarily to come back to this thing of plexity. I don't see that as opposed to what you're saying. You know what I mean? I just think it's
Yeah.
all light, really, at different. Anyway, do you
You
see
know,
any?
I want to give a little comic relief here. You said Plexity. That reminded me of, oh yeah, South Park, that cartoon.
Yeah, of course.
And I
A
one of the
classic.
one of the characters was making marijuana. He's growing his own weed.
Which one? Kenny? No.
It was someone's father.
Cartman.
One of the guy's father. One of the main kid's father, and he called it Tegrity. He called his weed Tegrity, like integrity. Like, I'm from America. We believe in integrity.
Oh my God.
Anyway,
South
Plexity,
Park was South Park was
integrity.
so good. No, I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
Do you see any synergy between what you were just talking about with Vedanta philosophy and Hegelian thought? And is there a relationship between that and then kind of Jungian and Hegelian thought as complementarity there?
Yes, I do. For Hegel, as we were talking earlier, he, I believe his concept of the idea, which is very much like Plato's idea of the good and like Jung's archetype of the self or the unus mundus, he's
Hmm.
called it the idea. That's the source of everything. And he says it manifests as nature and spirit. And the goal of history, he says, is for spirit, which is the intellectual manifestation of the idea, to recognize its unity with nature via their unity in the idea, their origin in the idea. The goal of history is to recognize that all things originate in the idea.
Mm.
And he said, following Plato, that the way to do that, the way to study spirit is to study its mirror opposite, matter. And then he said, the essence of matter is gravity, the essence of spirit is freedom. So if spirit is a reflection of matter, then the laws of gravity should reflect the laws of spirit. And then he says, matter is not free because it seeks a center outside of itself. It's not self-sufficient. It seeks a center outside of itself. It's always pulled toward a center,
Mm.
but it's never that center is never within itself.
Hmm.
Whereas spirit is pulled toward the center that is itself, and that is its freedom. Those are the ways he described it. So I'm saying a singularity seeks its own center at an infinite rate because it's a point of infinite gravity. It's an infinitely deep gravitational well collapsing into itself at an infinite rate. It's the essence of freedom and spirit, according to Hegel's definition, which Robert Bruce Ware pointed out. Matter, the essence of it is gravity, but it seems the essence of spirit, freedom, can also be defined as a point of infinite gravity
Mm.
because that is what collapses into its own center at an infinite rate. So I see his idea of the end of history is when spirit realizes its unity with nature and the idea from which nature and spirit both emerge, I see that as a recognition of psyche equals singularity, according to Jung's definition in the Leap Day letter. So Jung and Hegel mix there, and there's a lot of overlap between Hegel and Jung, as Sean Kelly will tell you. But the mandala shape of the cosmos.
That's what I was about to ask you. So you just anticipated.
Go on. Right, that's the next logical step.
Yeah.
So Jung and Pauli, Jung analyzed Pauli, 1,000 of Pauli's dreams, and Pauli recorded them carefully, like a scientist, which was invaluable for Jung, because it was what a mind can carefully write down the dream imagery that he had. And they both agreed, and Jung already thought this was the case, that whenever a psyche is pulled by opposing demands, it's compensated by the self archetype with images of mandalas, circles or spheres with a central point. It draws that towards wholeness through the union of opposites. So they defined the self archetype, or the unus mundus, the one, God. That's the different words for the same fundamental ordering principle. They said that the image that it portrays during dreams and fantasies is a mandala, a circle or sphere with a central point. It's the archetype of wholeness through the union of opposites, and it will guide you there. It's like a signpost on a trail. So when you're being torn in dreams or in fantasies, you'll find mandalas guiding you towards wholeness through the union of opposites. So I'm saying the self is this omnicentric singularity. But the singularity also creates a spherical horizon. It's the event horizon of a black hole, which marks the point where the fabric of space-time is collapsing in toward the central point at the speed of light. And in the universe, it's called the horizon of the cosmos, or the cosmic horizon, which is where, from our geocentric perspective, the fabric of space-time is expanding away at the speed of light. So if you go past it, you can't get back into the universe. Carl Jung said during his near-death experience in 1944, when he came back, he said, "It seemed to me as if each of us lives in our own little cube of illusion, or imprisoned in our own little cube of illusion, tethered to the horizon of the cosmos by a thread." That's a quote from Memories, Dreams, Reflections. And he furthermore said, it seemed that the past, the present, and the future were interwoven. And I'm assuming he was referring to out there at the horizon of the cosmos, because he said he had these nightly visions after his near-death experience for about an hour at midnight every night, and he would experience all these archetypes every night. So I am saying that the horizon of the cosmos, from our geocentric perspective, is equivalent to, it isn't equivalent to, it is the collective unconscious mind. It's where all of the archetypes, the absolute ideas, exist. And they radiate the material temporary forms in from there, specifically on these strings of energy, which is what string theory says. I was watching Through the Wormhole with Morgan Freeman on the 4th of July, 2010, in Marin County, north of CIIS, at my friend Mike Bellerin's house. And this Through the Wormhole came on. It was Morgan Freeman, and he was talking. It was the second episode. It was called Riddle of Black Holes.
I remember that. I remember I was at university when it came out. I remember, yeah.
Yeah, and he was interviewing Leonard Susskind, and Leonard Susskind was saying that the past, all of the information, every bit of information, to use his technical language, is smeared out in this infinitely hot horizon of the cosmos at each point of it, like a holographic film. And it radiates back in with the echo of the Big Bang, the cosmic microwave background radiation on these elastic fundamental strings of energy, which are too small, the Planck scale, to be detected with our mechanical apparatus. They're not spiritual things, but they're the Planck length, 10 to the negative 33 centimeters. We don't have technology powerful enough to see something that small. But the math indicates that this world is like a holographic movie, or what he calls a cinematic hologram, projected from the spherical horizon of the cosmos where everything is recorded, which was this perfect mirror, not even a mirror, saying the same thing Carl Jung was saying decades earlier, which he experienced directly as an out-of-body experience. His psyche experienced that. He also experienced the big black rock temple 1,000 miles above the earth with the black Hindu, and that was
So
cool.
where's that? That's what I wanted to ask you is where, in inverted commas, is that this place,
Right.
this dimension he goes to? It's the next level, right, after you die, because he sees the doctor who's treating him in the hospital.
Yeah.
He sees him there, and then he's
Right.
convinced he's going to die because he's in this kind of pantheon of
Right.
of souls, disincarnate souls.
Yeah.
And lo and behold, the doctor dies 2 weeks later. So I'm wondering, within your framework of reality, where is this domain? Is everything that's non-physical sort of at this kind of cosmic horizon, or is there some other like hyperdimensional geometry structure going on within it?
Well, one speculation I have is, according to Susskind, and he worked with Gerard 't Hooft, who's this Nobel Prize winning physicist from the Netherlands. But Susskind really championed it and he popularized it with his books. So I just focus on him. He's also an atheist, which is I love for my purposes because it's not like I'm quoting some woo-woo guy.
Right.
He's
Yeah.
definitely the opposite of that. And he and 't Hooft came up with two principles: the holographic principle, which is that all of the information in any three-dimensional volume of space exists simultaneously at the two-dimensional surface area. So in the room here, all of the information from the past, present, and future of this entire room exists at each point of the ceiling, the walls, and the floor. Who would have thought? But that's what they say.
Ah.
And the reason I like that is when you have these near-death experiences, the first thing people recall is I rose out of my body and I'm looking at myself from the ceiling, or I'm looking at myself panoramically from all of the direction of the room, which is a friend of mine said he saw during a coma. He was in a coma and he had
Wow.
a panoramic vision of his own body. But most people say I'm looking down, like I can see the fixtures of the lights in the ceiling. And then I rise higher and I'm looking down at the hospital. This is what Carl Jung said. And then he said, I rose 1,000 miles above the earth later, reflecting on what he saw. He estimated that's how high he would have had to be. He saw the reddish sands of Arabia. He saw clouds. And then he saw floating toward him a huge hollowed out black boulder, like the ones he'd seen in India on the Bay of Bengal, on the shores of the bay. They would just hollow out a huge black boulder into a temple. This one was floating in space 1,000 miles above the earth. It was the size of a house, and there was a black Hindu in a white robe sitting in a lotus posture in the antechamber. Behind him was a brilliantly lit room where Jung said, I felt as if all the people to whom I belong in reality were there. And as I approached, my entire life was ripped from me very painfully. But then it was given back, the past, the present, and the future. So his whole life flashes before his eyes. And as he's approaching, then his doctor, Dr. H, rises up and says, the earth has need of you. And then he woke up. But I think, so the holographic principle, all of that information, all of the information that has ever occurred or ever will occur on Earth is recorded in its two-dimensional spherical boundary, which I guess the outer boundary of the Earth's atmosphere is about 1,000 miles. So my speculation is in his out-of-body experience, his psyche was kind of experiencing something on that level. And when he looked into that room, he says, I got the feeling that if I could talk to those people, I would get an understanding of everything, the links of the past and the future. And it seemed he was alluding to reincarnation and that he would learn his entire trajectory, where he had been and where he was going. And then when he woke up from that, he said it seemed to him as if each of us is in a little cube tethered to the horizon of the cosmos by a thread. So his encounter with that black rock temple and the black Hindu led him to the conclusion that the reality of the universe is out at the horizon and it's projected in on threads and it's a prison, which is what Plato says.
Yeah.
In the Republic, the cave, we're in a prison,
Yeah.
and also in the Timaeus, he calls the outermost sphere the mother substance, and it contains
The
the
Korah.
past, the present.
From
What's
the
that?
Korah. From the Korah. The
What's
Kora
that?
is the mother. It's the he calls it the wet
Oh,
nurse of all becoming.
oh, nice.
It's the
Yeah. Well,
female counterpart to the demiurge, but it I don't want to go too down this tangent now. Derrida, I wrote an essay on it. Derrida and many post-structuralists really got into it because it's at the very edge of meaning. But
right.
it's like it's kind of neither being nor becoming. It's where everything emerges from, and it's very kind of disruptive, but
Yeah.
it's a feminine kind of ground of
Yeah.
emergence. So I was just
Totally.
wondering if that's what you were referring to.
Yeah. That's absolutely what I'm referring
Okay, it's the
to.
Korah. It's the Korah.
Yeah. That mirrors the holographic principle applied to the universe. That's Plato's Timaeus. In the Phaedrus, it's the same thing. You have this near-death experience. You ride your chariot, your winged chariot. The horses have wings, and you go out to if you have sufficiently trained yourself, you go out to the horizon of the cosmos and you see the absolute ideas. So I think it's a huge, cool thing that
Mm.
academic physics, which started with Plato's academia, was set out to discover his absolute idea of the good. I believe the plan he set up succeeded, despite the intentions of the atheistic physicist who brought it across the finish line, Leonard Susskind, because his holographic string theory of the multiverse of universes with information conservation at the spherical horizon and a singularity in the center of each one is a very close mirror of Vedanta philosophy with this megaverse of bubble universes and Jung's near-death experience and Plato's cosmology of this information conservation where the archetypes exist out of this mother substance, the Kora,
Yeah.
the wet nurse. And that's a great way they describe that because in Psyche and Singularity, I compare the way Plato describes that. He's like, it's mysterious. It can barely be described. It exists somewhere between being and not
Yeah.
being.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the way Susskind describes the horizon of the cosmos, it's only there from certain perspectives. If you travel in a spaceship out to the horizon, it recedes with every inch you move forward. But if you had a telescope that was powerful enough from Earth to see out there, then you would see it's an infinitely hot boundary of space-time. So it's only existing, then that was the two other principles he had, black hole complementarity and cosmic complementarity, which is the inverse order. According to black hole complementarity, if you follow information past the event horizon of a black hole, it's erased from the universe. You can't get back out. And that's what Stephen Hawking was saying. He was saying black holes destroy what's called the principle of the conservation of information, which most people haven't heard of. You've heard of the principle of the conservation of energy and mass. More fundamental than that, I learned from Susskind, is the principle of information conservation. Hawking said black holes destroy it. Susskind was losing his mind because he realized that means the foundation of physics is destroyed. So that started what was called the black hole war between Susskind and Hawking. And that's what Morgan Freeman was talking about in that episode. Susskind won the black hole war by saying, yeah, you're right, Stephen Hawking, that information is lost from the universe, but only from the perspective of someone who follows it past the event horizon. From the perspective of someone who's outside the black hole, what they would see is that information gets smeared out all around that spherical boundary of the black hole and then get released with the outgoing Hawking radiation, which is when a virtual particle antiparticle pair emerge from the quantum vacuum on the razor's edge of the event horizon so that the antiparticle gets sucked in and the virtual particle is allowed to go out. Normally they emerge and then annihilate each other. Mm-hmm. But the event horizon separates them and allows the virtual particle to carry a bit of information on the event horizon back out, thereby conserving information and saving the principle of information conservation. The reverse of that is called cosmic complementarity. If you go out past the horizon of the cosmos, you can't get back in. But if from the perspective of someone who stays in the universe, as they see you approach the horizon, they'll see you get smeared out around this infinitely hot sphere and then radiate back in with the cosmic microwave background radiation, which is like the inverse of Hawking radiation. So cosmic complementarity, black hole complementarity, the horizon of the cosmos is there from only certain perspectives. It's not there from others. So it's not a physical thing. I'm saying it isn't a physical thing. It's the collective unconscious mind. And each of us is a singularity And from the perspective of people on a planet and what we perceive as the horizon of the cosmos, they would be in the center of the universe and we would be at the horizon. Wherever you go in the universe, from your perspective, you're the center and everything's expanding away from you.
Mm-hmm.
So that's another important point. I equate the central singularity with the conscious ego pole of the self archetype, and I equate the horizon with the collective unconscious pole. But they flip into each other and they both exist within each other.
Mm-hmm.
And they're relative terms from a physical perspective of where you are in the universe. But we're all one with this omnicentric singularity.
Okay. Thank you. To expand on all of this from a more teleological perspective, I'd like to offer a quote from Jung from Memories, Dreams, Reflections from this specific segment of the near-death experience, which I said to you earlier.
Mm-hmm.
He says, I have never since entirely freed myself from the impression that this life is a segment of existence which is enacted in a three-dimensional, box-like universe, especially set up for it. The bit I want to emphasize is that final part, especially set up for it. Who's set it up? Like what? Because you've done a lot of amazing deconstructing of your terms and the what, right? And the parallels. I'd love
Right.
to hear more of your perspective on the why
Mm-hmm.
and this kind of the teleological architecture of it. Like, it seems like we're just playing this holographic video game, like it's a
Mm-hmm.
video game, and we're
Right.
here to like attain self-mastery and move up the levels of the game, right?
Yeah.
You know, like
Yeah.
I see it as also as a very ludic, very playful universe. I'm wondering what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, well, I believe in God, and I believe that this is God's dream.
Mm,
This is a bubbling dream of God, and that we are living out God's subconscious mind. I believe that the spiritual world is inhabited by spiritual planets, and that there's spiritual forms of absolute knowledge and bliss. They're made of these, and that we here are acting out the subconscious repressions of, I guess, our eternal selves there. That we're members of this eternal community, and temporarily we're down here in this realm, reincarnating through material bodies, which is what Plato believed and the Vedanta philosophers believe. And that's the supreme self. This is the subconscious part of the infinite consciousness. And so the purpose of all of this, of all the information being recorded at the horizon of the cosmos, I don't think it has a purpose. It just is the way God's mind works. But the purpose overall of life in general, I think, is for us little parts and parcels of the supreme self to realize our position and to get in with the flow. To, okay, I get it. Well, I have some autonomy, but what do you advise? What's the big plan here? I want to, and just get in sync with the supreme self. Like I always think of my pinky. I'm like, I want my pinky to obey me without question. I don't want it to
not a rogue,
hesitate. Right, because then I'm going to be just,
a mutiny, a
right.
digital
Yeah, if you have
mutiny.
a mutiny of body parts, it's not a happy situation. So to try to intuit, and also I think part of our duty is to psychoanalyze God, as you were saying earlier.
Yeah.
I believe part of our duty, it isn't like God's the parent and we're the child all the time. I think it can be reversed. And we're like, okay, God, I see. I get it. You got some issues going on here. I can see them unfolding in my own life painfully and sometimes humiliatingly. So then just console God. Yeah, that's where what form of religion you believe in, what are the specific mythical stories that you believe in, how that you can interpret events as being somehow shadow reflections of them, and that gets into a whole nother ball of yarn. But I follow synchronicities,
Mm,
and
mm,
synchronicities have led me to the Krishna path.
yeah.
So I think of Radharani and Krishna, the divine lovers, the cowherd girl Radharani and the cowherd boy Krishna. He plays the flute. And then he grows up, he leaves Vrindavan, Radharani's brokenhearted. He becomes a warrior king, but he's always thinking of Radharani anyway. Here, I'll give you an example. If you want to get a little crazy, I'll break it down really quickly. According to that myth, that sacred story of Krishna, he's got a brother Balaram. This is going to sound controversial, but I was just trying to use the logic of my theory. And Balaram's white, and Krishna is black. They're cowherd boys. How they could be brothers and one black and white, I don't know, but that's eternally the way it is. That he's the Rama of Hari Rama, Balaram. He's the older brother, but he's a secondary manifestation from Krishna. At any rate, the Hare Krishna movement came to it started in the early 1500s by this Chaitanya is the person who started it, born in 1496. In 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue and discovered America. Thought it was India, called the natives Indians. So, oh, that's strange. That's a world historical event. The transcontinental slave trade began as a result. Then so at any rate, America, I say, is the race relations of America show a subconscious shadow side of Krishna and Balaram's relationship. Because their eternal relationship is Balaram's the older brother and he takes care of Krishna. But all the women love Krishna more. They think Balaram's pretty cool, but Krishna is really what they're fascinated with. I would imagine that would engender some sibling rivalry. You would think, and then maybe Balaram would be like, no, I'm the older brother. You're just, oh, you're so pretty. No, and then what it gets manifested as in America by the races, which are manifest in the subconscious mind of the Godhead, which manifests as Balaram and Krishna and Radharani.
Right.
The white race says, oh, yeah, you're my little brother, but you're, not even quite fully human, but I'll take care of you. You just do what I say. And if you don't, I'll beat you to death. And it's just this brutal relationship. And furthermore, it expands into this whole cowboy thing where they're herding cattle out brutally and killing them. So everything's the opposite of this paradise of Vrindavan, where they love the cows. They get milk from the cows. Krishna and Balaram are always friends. Balaram protects Krishna. The inverse and perverted and inverted reflection of that relationship I see unfolding in the race relations of the United States of America. And then in 1965, the man who's brought this Gaudiya Vaishnava school of Vedanta to America, Srila Prabhupada, he came and he brought it to America in 1965, which was like the culmination of the race, equal rights amendments and all of this. So anyway, that's one of the ways I see using this kind of a philosophy. What's our teleological duty? And that's why I said it's kind of specific on what do you think God's consciousness is like? And how would you therefore interpret this as God's subconscious mind? But I just gave you one example that I think it makes some sense. It seems to be, yeah.
So we're like the kind of unintegrated shadow aspects of these archetypal deities, which are themselves kind of iterations of the one Godhead kind.
Yeah.
Fascinating. Yeah. You mentioned in this chain of thought, you mentioned synchronicity and how a cluster of synchronicities occurred that led you down a certain path. Am I correct?
Yeah.
So this very much affirms my deep intuition and my line of research, which is that there is a causal or teleological aspect to synchronicity. So they're not entirely acausal, meaningful coincidences. They actually belong to a much deeper structure of order, meaning, temporality, purpose, right? And a journey going somewhere. At least this is my intuition and something I'm going to pursue and continue researching. But I wanted just to dive into this a bit insofar as it relates to Kairos, and Chronos, since the seasonal arc of this podcast is Kairos. I know Jung didn't speak about Kairos a lot, but he spoke about it a little bit, and it is important in regards to synchronicity, and therefore the collaboration between Jung and Pauli, seeing as synchronicity was so integral to their collaboration.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to ask you about Kairos, what your understanding of it is, how it fits into your framework, how you might think of time in a symbolic context, and whether Kairos, i.e. the moment of meaning as opposed to just linear entropic time, whether it might have an actual kind of ontological axis. Does that, if any of that makes sense?
I'm not sure exactly what you mean by ontological axis,
Like
but
so it's not, we know chronological time is real. Like in physics, this is a verifiable phenomenon. We measure it. It's measured.
Mhm.
Kairos, and of course I'm talking about materialist science, and neither you or I are materialists. Kairos is something entirely metaphorical, right?
Mhm. Okay.
Comparatively, it's a metaphorical time. It's not an actual
Okay.
time.
Right,
I'm
right, right.
wondering, based on your much more holistic, expanded, right, conception, and
Hmm.
specifically how you conceive temporality,
Hmm.
right,
Yeah.
our perceived flow of linear time here, which, by the
Right.
way, is a physical process. It's a second law of thermodynamics.
Yeah.
Then to think about kairos, yeah, which is when you have a synchronicity, it's that moment of boom.
Hmm.
Oh, I get it. I see the interconnected web. You know, it's that, for me, this is how I really understand kairos, because it's meaning. It's that perfect moment of meaning.
Yeah.
Also, that moment, quite a decisive moment. So often, when it comes in relation to our purpose or we're being guided on a path, it's that moment where it's like, oh, I need to call this person. I need to take this step because
Hmm.
this flash of illumination has been revealed to us. And
Oh,
that is
yeah.
the quintessence of Kairos. So when I talk about the ontological axis, I'm wondering, you've been talking to me about gravity in these really, really cutting edge terms.
Mhm.
So I'm wondering now how Kairos might fit into your framework.
Right. Well, first, before we forget, there's Shelley Joy's painting Kairos. So
Yeah.
Shelley Joy, she gave me a blurb. I want to give Shelley Joy a shout out.
Yeah.
So author of Tuning the Mind, Holonomic Brain Theory and the Implicate Order. So she was very kind to give me a blurb for the book. I'll give myself a shout out there. It's in the front page.
Beautiful.
Yeah, and California Institute of Integral Studies. We're in the Philosophy, Cosmology, and Consciousness program. She's got a background in electrical engineering and also a great artist. And she made this wonderful painting. And on the back, in big letters, it says Kairos 2010. So at any rate, and I thought it was cool. The word I had heard it, but I didn't really know what it meant. And doesn't it also mean like a time, a changing of the gods?
I
Is that
think
another
so.
meaning for
That's hold
Kairos?
on. I'm just getting my PhD file out because at the beginning of the syllabus is this quote from Jung. We are living in what the Greeks called the kairos, the right moment for a metamorphosis of the gods, of the
Mm.
fundamental principle in symbols. This peculiarity of our time, which is certainly not of our conscious choosing, is the expression of the unconscious human within who is changing.
Yeah. So yeah, like a phase change of consciousness, the Kairos, the
Mm.
proper time, linking it with synchronicity. I mean, as we were talking about before, I looked at one concept of Kairos, and you're going to do another podcast with someone. You talked about Kairos as the aperture of time.
Right.
So that makes me think of a black hole. An aperture of time is a black hole. It's a literal hole in the fabric of space-time.
Yeah.
But I think historically, the Kairos moment, which Hegel would call the end of history, is when
Right.
spirit realizes its unity with nature and the idea from which nature and spirit both emanate. So I'm looking at Jung's idea of psyche equals singularity. When that becomes more widely recognized, that would be a kairos because it's got the physics backing it and it's got the greatest minds, Plato, Carl Jung, Hegel. It seems to be all converging literally on this point. It just seems too perfect to be coincidental and accidental.
Mm.
It's not like I came up with these things. Okay, if we identify this as the singularity, where else can we find it? It pops up everywhere,
You're
as one
joining
would,
the dots.
yeah, literally dots,
Yeah.
literally points,
No pun
mathematical.
intended.
Yeah, right. So it all works out so perfectly. And synchronicities all inherently points to this absolute archetype of wholeness through the union of opposites,
Mm-hmm.
because it's a union of the material, unthinking world, somehow perfectly correlated in a symbolic way with your meaning perceiving mind.
Right.
So it's a union of opposites. So they all point to the mandala image of the union of the archetype of the union of opposites.
Yeah.
Which makes sense because the universe itself is an inside-out black hole, which is a geometrically perfect mandala. It's a mathematical point outside of space and time, contains all space and time, and that point exists at each point of the encompassing sphere. The singularity exists at each point of the sphere. All of the archetypes, the absolute ideas, all of the past, present, and future of all the material forms is condensed at each point of this encompassing sphere. That is what accounts for synchronicity, I say in the book, because mind and matter are all united at the horizon of the cosmos. So synchronicities beg the question, well, where's the connecting point? The unfolding of unthinking matter correlates symbolically with my thinking mind. There's got to be some point where they start out united, or there's got to be some organizing force is clearly connecting matter and mind. And it points to this architect of the union of all these opposites, but specifically out at the horizon of the cosmos, because space and time are radiating in from there, according to string theory. So it provides a platform to describe the mechanics of synchronicity. And it provides a platform for where the archetypes of meaning exist. And according to Plato, all the material forms you see radiate from their perfect ideal form out at the horizon of the cosmos. So synchronicities are all little miniature kairoses, and I think they point to the end of the history, the Hegelian kairos, which is the moment of individuation in a Jungian perspective.
Yes. Yeah.
I wrote some papers on this that are up on my website, Psyche and Singularity.
Right.
Yeah, since I published that book, I've been delving into a lot of Hegel and trying to figure out how to synthesize those two around the psyche equals singularity equation.
Nice. What I'm hearing from you and what you just said and in relation to kairos is that there might be different qualities or degrees of kairos, almost like miniature little punctures in the space-time fabric, like little like baby black holes almost, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
and then
sure.
it's kind of like at a larger, in the same way you get a black hole and you have a supermassive black hole, like there's scales of it.
Yeah,
Then you
there's
have more like
ones.
a collective cultural Hegelian end of history situation, which is, you know, a kind of bigger kairotic aperture. And again, linking it back to this mandalic black hole singularity thing you've been delineating.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the Hegelian end of history, kairos, is when we realize we're all one with the enormous inside out black hole of the universe.
That's like ascension time.
Yeah, well, it's for Hegel, it's freedom time. It's when the government,
which is ascension. That is heaven on earth.
Yeah, sure it is. Yeah, when you obey the laws based on that principle, you're really obeying yourself, and therefore you feel free. So it's as close to heaven as you can get in a physical world. It will be heavenly consciousness in a material realm.
Heaven on earth. It's like to end on heaven on earth as a kind of crystallization of everything we've discussed would be really beautiful. And wow, I need time to integrate everything you said because there's so much information embedded in what you've described. And thank you so much for your work on this planet, you know, in this incarnation. Thank you. It's really important. I really appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for letting me babble on about it. I love to talk about it. You're like, oh, thank you. I'm like, are you kidding me?
I
Like
get
Socrates said, I would pay people if I had the
I
money.
get it. I'm the same. If someone asks me about my research about time, I'm like absolutely off to the races. So I get it. I get it. Yeah, this was a pleasure. Thank you. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed the show. If you'd like to go deeper into my work and find out about my offerings at the Temple, my School of Consciousness and Metaphysics, just head to my website, www.arabellataïs.com, for more information, all the links in the show notes. See you next time.